Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joel Amin Jr., and I am the Program Manager of the Catalyst Fund here at Cinnaire. I am so excited to be here with you today in partnership with the Delaware State Housing Authority, hosting our Catalyst Fund workshop entitled Getting Developers Ready to Submit. The goal of this workshop is to assist you all with putting together as high quality of an application as possible in a quick and efficient time frame. This workshop is intended for those who already had or have plans of submitting a project for this program. So we hope that it is not necessarily your first time hearing about the program, or that you all referred to the previous outreach session recording sent out in the very invitation used to register for this event today. I would like to start off first by sharing the agenda for the day. It is broken down into 8 specific sections that we will be exploring in detail over the next hour and a half or so. We hope that you can attend the entire presentation. However, we will be recording for those who cannot. As you can see, the majority of this presentation today will be focused on the Catalyst Fund submission requirements. This program is unique in nature, given that it is tied to federal funding, and we will require all applications to strictly follow the guidelines and submit all due diligence requested of you. If you fail to meet these requirements in a timely manner, we will not be able to move your application forward. This will also be a competitive process, so it is of the utmost importance to put as much quality and intention into your application as possible, carefully reviewing all questions, due diligence checklists, and follow-up emails that you may receive, largely in the form of RFIs or requests for information. We will also open up with brief introductions from both ourselves and the DSHA team, provide a quick overview on the program, understand what it means to be ready to submit, discuss our feedback mechanism, the program timeline, and then open up for Q&A at the end. We will be using the chat feature to receive questions, which will again be answered at the end of the presentation. With that, let's dive right in. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Joel Amin Jr., and I am the Program Manager for the Catalyst Fund here at Cinnaire. I have the pleasure of introducing Ms. Deanna Sargent, Vice President of Cinnaire Community Connection, and Wayne Bota, Loan Officer with Cinnaire Lending. Would the two of you like to say hello, starting with Deanna Sargent, followed by Wayne?
Good morning, everyone. I was trying to wait until this truck went by. But thank you all for joining. I'm Deanna Sargent, Vice President of Community Connection, overseeing our community development work in Wilmington and the Catalyst Fund on behalf of Cinnaire. Again, thank you all for joining, and I hope that you get a lot out of this presentation and use this information to create a strong application that you are ready to submit at or before the round 2 application deadline. Thank you.
Thank you, Deanna. Wayne?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Wayne Bota. I am a loan officer with Cinnaire Corporation. I work with Joel and Deanna to basically assemble the applications, make sure we have all the due diligence items, and then work with neighborhood partners to process your applications and hopefully move you through the system into approval and closing. We'll be looking forward to working with everyone.
Thank you very much. I would now like to hand it off to the DSHA team for introductions, after which we will provide a quick refresher on who Cinnaire is and what this program is all about. Rochelle, please.
Good morning. My name is Rochelle Knapp, and I am the Chief of Special Initiatives here at Delaware State Housing Authority. I am currently the Program Manager for the Catalyst Fund on behalf of the DSHA team. At this time, I will turn it over to our partner, Michaela Conroy.
Thanks, Rochelle. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michaela Conroy, and myself and my colleague Katie Rose are here today from Cone Resident.
Thank you very much. Cinnaire is a community development financial institution, one whose mission is driven and it prides itself on creating opportunities for those in underserved communities through real estate development and lending activities specifically. We create out-of-the-box solutions to tackle challenging issues across diverse communities. Some of the specific products and services that we offer are pre-development loans, acquisition financing, permanent financing, short-term gap or bridge financing, and community development financing. The Catalyst Fund is designed to support efforts to address vacant buildings and lots in communities disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Its goal is to address vacant properties which we know pose health and safety hazards, depress values, and present barriers to community stabilization. These properties often cost more to rehabilitate than they could be sold for, especially when trying to keep the price affordable. The Catalyst Fund intentionally addresses this need. This program is intended to fund single-family properties only. This can include the rehabilitation of an existing vacant property or the new construction of a single-family property on vacant land. With said new construction, you may build up to 5 units that are connected to each other, similar to townhome style or a block of row homes, but they must be separate units with separate entrances and parcels. We will not accept rental projects, condo projects, or multifamily projects for this program. And again, these homes are to be sold for home ownership. The program is open to both experienced and emerging developers. We allow for for-profit developers, nonprofit developers, and emerging developers to apply for this program. The definition that we are using for emerging developer is somebody who has completed less than 10 single-family development projects and has completed a real estate development training program. Developers with interest in renovating these vacant properties can apply for construction financing through Cinnaire or access the subsidy without using our construction loan from DSHA directly. However, this presentation will be focusing on the construction financing option. You can learn more about the self-funded route on DSHA's new website and potentially later on in this workshop from the DSHA team. This Cinnaire construction loan is set with non-negotiable terms. The financing will ultimately be reviewed and approved by DSHA to ensure that the development project is eligible for the sales gap subsidy to be provided by their team. The sales gap subsidy will be available only upon completion and sale of the home, along with the submission of all required documentation. This is also when the developer fee will be released, which is the lesser of 15% of the total development cost, or $20,000. It is of extreme importance to note that the developer will ultimately be responsible for finding a home buyer. Us and the DSHA team will not be responsible for the sale of the unit. And remember from the previous slide, your subsidy and developer fee are not released until the home is sold. It is also important to note that the end home buyer will be responsible for signing a 5-year subsidy retention agreement. This is an agreement between the homeowner and DSHA stating that they acknowledge the presence of DSHA subsidy attached to the home and that they agree to live there for at least 5 years in order to truly realize the benefit of the subsidy, which ultimately is the reason the home buyer is able to purchase the home at a lower price compared to the cost of construction that will be invested into the home. At the end of the 5-year period, the agreement is released and the homeowner now has that equity free and clear. The amount of the subsidy liability that the homeowner will have will decrease by 20% each year until the 5th year is reached. Here is a map of eligible areas to remind you all that this is a statewide program. We have created a tool that will allow you to simply type in an address and determine whether or not it is in an eligible area. And this tool is located on the Cinnaire Catalyst Fund landing page, as well as the DSHA website. Now that we have had our quick Catalyst Fund refresher, let's dive deeper into the application process. There are 4 main requirements that we are evaluating when it comes to being ready to submit. They are all equally as important, as we cannot have a project move forward if these 4 items are not met. The number 1 item, and this is a big one that often made the difference in an application moving forward or not, was having a path to site control. You have to show us that there is a plan in motion or agreement that will truly allow you to purchase or finance, if already owned, an eligible property. Secondly, all project eligibility must be met. This means the type of property, the location, entity status, education or training requirements, and more must be met. Thirdly, all due diligence must be present. This will come from the due diligence checklist that we will explore later in this presentation. The faster your diligence is in, the faster our team can process your application. Finally, a notice of intent to apply must be submitted by your group. This notice will be due on May 15th, prior to the round closing of May 30th. We need you all to truly be ready to submit rather than turning in an incomplete application, as there are many steps to this program. I want to emphasize again the importance of submitting this form, as we will not be able to accept your application without this notice of intent to apply document. There are 4 core requirements to our Catalyst Fund submission, all of which require careful attention to detail. We will examine each of these 4 components individually so you can further understand which each item looks like and entails. The first is your completed application, inclusive of a signed cover page. You would be surprised how many applications we received unsigned, and that is the easiest part. Please make sure to sign your cover page. The second is your certified Catalyst property condition report. Again, this must be signed off on by a local official. The third is your Catalyst Fund workbook, my personal favorite. This is a Microsoft Excel file which will contain your project budgets and an overall summary of your financial requests. It is very important that this is properly filled out and all instructions contained within are followed carefully. The fourth piece is your ASTM environmental questionnaire. This is a form on our website provided by our partners at Brightfields Incorporated, which will help us to understand a little bit more about the history of the subject property with regards to environmental hazards. If any of these items are missing, your application will be considered incomplete. Here you will see the cover page of the Catalyst Fund application. As you can see, there are several items that you as the developer will need to certify. Please take care to read each item thoroughly, as you will be held to what you agree here. If your application cover page is not signed, we will not your application. Some of the items that you will need to certify include you understanding and complying with the DSHA minimum construction standards listed in Appendix B, your understanding and complying with the DSHA minimum energy standards listed in Appendix B, you understanding and agreeing to affirmatively further fair housing and comply with the provisions of all applicable laws prohibiting discrimination, including but not limited to the information listed. And finally, if the property is in a 100-year flood zone, we agree to disclose the additional insurance requirements to the buyer. Now you will see a few of the places where the application will request some basic information about the applicant, such as the name of your organization, the address, the date of incorporation, and your EIN. It will also ask for information on the development team, including the architect, engineer, general contractor, and more. It is important that we collect all of the information requested so that we can truly understand who you and your team completing the project are. Next, you will see some of the more in-depth questions that are included in the application. On top here, you will see that the financing need is requested as well. You will not be able to properly fill this in unless you have completed your Catalyst Fund Excel workbook, and the numbers need to match up with each other. If the numbers are provided here with no basis, your application will not move forward. Below, you will see questions around the project description. While you do not have a word count minimum, we encourage all developers to include as comprehensive and thoughtful of a response as possible, as this will affect the evaluation of your responses and the overall application. Here are a list of the applicant questions. Describe the location of the proposed properties. Attach a map showing the location of the properties. Include any information about other revitalization work in the target area undertaken by the applicant or other groups. Please explain how the project fits into the broader community development strategy and how it will have a meaningful impact on the area. Describe any prior experience working in the neighborhoods where the project is proposed and any commitments to local hiring. Briefly describe specifics on the scope of work, including type of construction, materials used for exterior structure, and unit details. Provide a description of the current condition, use, or zoning, and attach supporting documentation. Describe any energy efficiencies or quality standards to be used, as well as the project amenities and how they compare with other housing being developed within the market area. Include specific model numbers or materials used to meet the standards in place. I would now like to invite the DSHA team to speak further on the application questions so that we can review some recommendations for completing the Catalyst Fund application. Please.
Thanks, Joel. So today, my colleague Katie and I are going to discuss how to construct a strong application in an effort to limit RFIs, or requests for information, and increase review efficiency so that we can turn around application approvals to you all as quickly as possible. And a little more information on an RFI, that's basically a document that we as the reviewers fill out in order to obtain additional information, whether that be additional supporting documentation or questions requesting clarification around already submitted information so that we can move forward. That would be sent to you, the applicant. You would provide the answers, and then that would be sent back to us as the reviewers. So for our first slide, we're going to talk about two overarching themes, which are completion and consistency. So completion kind of speaks for itself. We want to make sure that all of the fields are completed and that the cover page is signed by the developer. Each of the items on the checklist must be included as individual exhibits, and they must be clearly labeled. For example, the checklist requires a list of completed development projects for the last 5 years, which has often in the past been included with the personal resumes for the developer's key personnel. However, this should be submitted as a separate exhibit and it should be appropriately labeled. Our second theme is consistency. We want to see consistency across the application and all of the exhibits. So construction timelines, square footage, and other details must match across all of the provided documentation. As an example, the square footage that's listed in the subsidy calculation worksheet for each unit of the application should match what's listed in the application as well as all of the supporting exhibits. With that, I will turn it over to my colleague Katie for some themes on how to construct some great narrative answers.
Good morning, everyone. Are as comprehensive as possible. So each question is broken down into several parts. Please ensure that you're responding to all parts of the question. Additionally, please make sure that you write your answers in the space provided in the application. This helps us dramatically with efficiency in reviewing the applications. When you're referring to an exhibit, make sure you include its title and the page number, or copy and paste that information directly into the application space. Please also be detailed and specific with your answers. Your responses should be concrete, evidence-based, and individualized. For example, when you're responding to the meaningful impact, long-term economic impacts, as well as how those impacts tie into the city's overall community development strategy. We've included several example narrative responses here to highlight some specifics around what we're looking for. We can go to the next slide. The first example is in response to the question about experience working in the neighborhood and commitment to local hiring. And just as a side note, we'll make sure that these slides are available to everyone, so I won't read through this full answer. I just wanted to touch on the pieces that make these responses great. Experience in the area. They provide the exact location of the prior work, how much those projects cost to renovate, how much they sold for, and the specific trades involved. Project. The second paragraph provides information on the specific avenues information about the number and type of jobs they expect to be created. I'll hand it back to Michaela for the next slide.
Thanks, Katie. On this slide, we chose an answer that is a great example of how to respond to the question about describing any energy efficiencies or quality standards to be used, as well as project amenities and how they compare with other housing being developed in the market area. Here, what the applicant did was, instead of just telling us, they showed us what they would do. An answer that we've seen on previous applications is, we will abide by DSHA's energy efficiency standards. And unfortunately, that is not a sufficient answer. It would warrant an RFI. Here, however, it's a great response. They call out the specific energy efficiencies that will be installed and how they are different from other homes being developed in the market area. You see in the answer that they call out the fact that these techniques are not typical for builder grade housing, and that the developer is taking some extra steps. So once again, to reiterate, this answer is great because they're showing us rather than just telling us. And we can go to the next slide. I think Katie's having some audio issues, so I'll take over here. This answer is talking about the documentation to show the proposed home sales price is supportable in the market of the targeted neighborhood. In this specific example, they discuss and summarize the market analysis. A lot of previous answers just kind of put the sales price and didn't elaborate, or they would just say, see market analysis. So it is okay to refer us to the market analysis as long as you point us to which page and where to find it. However, it's preferable that for this answer, you kind of just give a quick summary. These were the homes in the area that were used for the analysis. These are how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, this was the square footage and the price per square footage, and this is how it compares to the home or homes in this application. Again, show us, don't just tell us. We can move to the next slide. So for our last example of a great detailed and specific answer, we are showing one that describes the marketing strategy to find program eligible home buyers. Here, the realtor, states how each of their pipeline expanding activities will target eligible populations rather than just stating that the activities will target the eligible home buying populations. I want to point out a couple of things that they did here that I think were really great. Specifically, they list that they are going to hold community outreach events in areas with high concentrations of target population individuals. Additionally, they mention the leveraging of down payment assistance programs, which are generally targeted to individuals in the same AMI levels that the Catalyst Fund program is targeting. And for our last slide, we're going to close with a couple of items that we've needed RFIs to remedy regarding the subsidy calculation worksheet. The first is around sources. So you'll see in the subsidy calculation worksheet an area to list all of your financing sources, including a cell labeled other subsidy. If you do have an other subsidy, you want to identify where that source comes from. So maybe it's a state grant, a city grant, etc. So you want to just identify whatever the source is in the status box, and then include as supporting documentations any award or commitment letters or a grant agreement. And finally, uses. In the worksheet, there are numerous line items for both hard and soft costs. However, we recognize that these may not accommodate all of your uses. So for both hard and soft costs, we have a couple of cells that at present say other. These cells are unlocked, so if you have any line items that are not already included, you want to replace the word other with whatever the specific use is, so that we can tie whatever the amount is to a specific use. And with that, we will turn it back over to Joel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michaela and Katie, especially for your flexibility with that little technical difficulty there. I really appreciate it. So here are a list of tips and tricks that summarize a lot of the information you just heard and will really help you in putting together your responses. So we encourage you to review this list thoroughly here, and I'm going to go through the responses so that you all can really reflect on this information. Provide detail on the property locations within the application and describe the community development strategy and detail, including how the new construction or rehabilitation of these specific properties will support the community development strategy from an economic perspective. Provide clear photos and a map to help illustrate the location of the proposed properties and their relationship to one another. Include details on condition, foundation, and specify any differences between properties included in one single application. Describe how the energy efficiency criteria will be met, citing specific model numbers or materials to be used. Provide details on the current condition of the properties, including phases of construction, quality standards, or project amenities, and how they will comply with minimum construction and energy standards. Elaborate on the types of jobs that will be created and how you plan to hire locally. Include all buildings in the construction timeline and detail those amenities, which will be included in the development, including how they compare to other properties in your market. Finally, include information on whether a pipeline of buyers has been established when completing your home sales section of the application. And I just want to reiterate that by using these tips and tricks, this could improve this will improve the strength of your application and challenge you to think comprehensively about each response. So this is a great list to refer to. Now let's discuss some of the due diligence requirements. While going through the Catalyst Fund application requirements, you will of course get familiar with our due diligence checklists and requirements, which is broken out into 8 categories total. The first 4 categories are your project description, financial projections, construction information, and market information. Within these sections, you will be asked to supply information such as a list of all addresses, the current ownership, a detailed scope of work, information on the development team, a detailed timeline, a completed sources and uses, which would be delivered via the Catalyst Fund workbook, a contractor's cost estimate or statement of work, and sales comparables, or that CMA you heard about, put together by a real estate agent or a broker. The next 4 sections are your borrower financials, your guarantor financials, your borrower organization diligence, and visuals. These sections include items such as your personal tax returns, your business tax returns, a personal financial statement, a REO or real estate owned schedule, a schedule of contingent liabilities, your certificate of formation, a resume and biography, an organization chart, and site photos and or elevations, depending on the type of project that you are taking on. It is critical that all items shown on both of these lists ultimately make their way into your underwriting files. If these items are not present in the initial submissions or in the period requested shortly thereafter, your application will not be able to move forward. Here is a quick snapshot of the actual due diligence list pulled directly from the Catalyst Fund application. Please make sure to review this list carefully and physically check each box when you have gathered that item so that you know everything is present and stay organized. An application is completed when all of these items shown are not present. Next, let's take a look at the property condition report. This form is relatively simple, asking for items such as the addresses, the parcel number, condition, and permits needed. However, there is one item in particular that has been tripping people up, and again, this is a simple signature, which you will see on the following page. This form must be signed off on by a local official who is qualified to opine on the condition of a property. An example could be someone from a local public municipality, a Department of Real Estate and Housing, or a land bank representative, and more. Please do not sign the form yourself, and if you have questions, please reach out. Next, let's take a look at the Catalyst Fund Excel workbook. This model may look a little bit intimidating at first. However, I want to assure you that it is relatively simple. This tool will allow you and ourselves to analyze your project for financial feasibility within the program guidelines. This first page here is simply a summary tab which aggregates all of your subsidy requests from the individual tabs you will be seeing in a moment. It is important that you read the instructions here at the top of your summary tab. On this worksheet, please enter data into cells highlighted in yellow only. Next, you will see the individual property tabs. There are 5 of these tabs in each model, since you can apply for up to 5 homes at once within this program. This is a sources and uses, which breaks out how you intend to allocate your budget among several categories of line items, inclusive of the acquisition, hard cost, and soft cost. From there, you will need to determine budgets on a granular level, being careful to review each line item available so that you can be as specific and detailed as possible. In most cases, your sources will be equal to your construction loan, and it will likely be just one source which is coming from our construction loan. As long as your project per unit is under $250,000, your construction loan should equal your total construction cost, unless you are building beyond $250,000 per unit. Once you complete this tab, data will automatically be pulled from this tab into your summary tab. Lastly, let's review the ASTM questionnaire supplied by Brightfields. This is a short 2-page form that is going to ask some preliminary questions about your knowledge on the site, such as the past use of the property, whether you know of any chemical spills or environmental cleanups that may have occurred at this property. If you are not completely sure, please answer to the best of your ability, but do not leave it blank. The next page contains some checkboxes that you are also going to have to fill out to the best of your knowledge. This form is available in the program materials section of the Catalyst Fund landing page and again is entitled the ASTM questionnaire. You will need to ensure that you sign the bottom of this page as well. And this form is critical to your application process. We are happy to answer questions on items such as the Excel workbook, application questions, general eligibility, and more. We can be reached at this email address above and will commit to getting back to you all in a timely manner. The more preparations that you all do now, the less challenging the submission process will be when it comes time to accept the application. We look forward to hearing from you all and reviewing your documentation. Here is a quick glimpse of the round 2 timeline. We are actually opening up round 1 officially on May 1st. On May 15th, the notice of intent to apply will be due. You can find this form located on the Catalyst Fund landing page in the program materials section. On May 30th, we will stop accepting applications for round 2 at 11:59 p.m. We would now like to open the floor for questions, which will be moderated and supported by Ms. Deanna Sargent. Thank you all very much, and we look forward to the Q&A session of this presentation.
Hello, everyone. Feel free to submit questions via the chat. If you submit a question in the chat, I'd be happy to read it on your behalf. Or you can use the raise hand function and I will call on you and you can unmute yourself to present your question. I know it's a lot of information for everyone to digest. It's Monday. So I will give everyone some time to put their questions together. We do have a few questions from Joseph Walls in the chat, so I'll begin reading those. The first question is, will the Catalyst Fund adhere to the federal guidelines for disadvantaged businesses contract set aside mandates for veteran-owned or minority or women-owned small businesses? I am going to ask if DSHA could respond to that, given the federal guidelines, and also if you could put your questions in the chat as a new question and not reply to Joseph's questions, that would help me better identify your question.
Thank you, Deanna. So just to answer Joseph's question, we haven't specified anything in our guidelines to specifically address those categories of a disadvantaged business, veteran-owned or minority-owned. Our guidelines are pretty straightforward and specific. So as long as you meet the requirements that are outlined in the guidelines, whether you're applying for self-funded or the loan option route, you'll qualify for the program. The applications and the available funding are first come, first serve, and it's also based on whether or not you submit a complete application and also whether or not your application is approved for funding as well as the receipt of the sales gap subsidy. So we don't have anything that specifically says, oh, this is for disadvantaged businesses, or anyone is permitted to apply as long as you meet the requirements that are outlined in the guidelines. So that we don't have a separate category for that, if that answers your question.
Thank you, Rochelle.
You're welcome.
The next question from Joseph, I'm going to read in multiple parts because he clarified his question later on. So the first question presented was experience. Experience as a developer seems to underlie much of the requirements. What about those who have limited experience as a developer? So I did ask if Joseph could provide a specific example to help us better answer that question. So he elaborated by stating, on the developer experience, we were denied funding through GROW Newcastle County funds because we lack development experience. Even though we have the capacity to hire the experts, I apologize for the background noise. Even though we have the capacity to hire the experts that we will need to complete the project. So Joel, do you want to take a stab at responding and then I can follow up after you?
Yes, thank you, Deanna. So this program is intended to support what we are labeling as emerging developers. And we spoke a little bit to this in the presentation. And the criteria for that was individuals who have developed 10 or less properties. So I'm not sure exactly where your experience level is, Joseph, but we certainly are intending to support both experienced and non-experienced developers with this program.
And so I'll just expand on that even further. So just a reminder that this program is both for experienced and emerging developers. So if you're an experienced developer on here, fret not, this program is designed for you as well. Joseph, I'm not sure if you were on the call earlier when Joel reviewed the emerging developer parameters, but we do have guidelines for who is classified as an emerging developer. So that is listed on our Cinnaire Catalyst Fund website, so you can review that. I see your follow-up question, what are resources for obtaining the developer training? So I think we provide an example of a developer training. We have a Jumpstart training program, but that's not the only training program that you have to complete. There are other real estate development training programs that are offered in Delaware as well as within the surrounding market. So if you've participated in a real estate development training, such as something through the Urban Land Institute or a certificate program from a local university, that would constitute as developer training.
Thank you so much, Deanna.
You're welcome. Let's see. There's another question from Joseph, and Joseph, I may need you to expand on this a little bit more too, just to make sure we understand your question. Are condo conversions covered by the Catalyst Fund, i.e. converting apartments to multifamily to single family home ownership? So is your question more so around are condos permitted, or if there's an existing condo, can that be converted to a single family for home ownership?
Yes, ma'am. What I'm asking about is because you earlier in the presentation, you said that multifamilies were excluded. And it would seem to me that for low income people, affordable housing, that if we could bust up these, 2, 3, 4 unit buildings and sell them as individual houses, is basically considered, back in the day, it was called a condo conversion.
Okay, so
because you said the condos themselves are not covered.
Correct. So, and Joel, feel free to opine. And this question came up during our last session. But in terms of converting a multifamily rental to a condo, that is also not permissible through this program. It has to be single family for home ownership for households at or below 120% area median income.
Yes, thank you so much, Deanna. There's no flexibility on condo conversions or condos for this specific program. Joseph.
There's another question from Joseph. Thank you so much for your engagement. I answered the question in the chat. I'll go ahead and read the question and the answer just in case anyone else is wondering about eligible areas. So the question was, are the areas of opportunity, the map color-coded areas adjustable? I have a property next to the Dover city limits for development, but is a couple feet outside of the map area. So the response is the eligible areas include qualified census tracts, or otherwise known as QCTs, Delaware State Housing Authority designated downtown development districts, or Delaware State Housing Authority designated strong neighborhoods. These are the eligible areas that cannot be adjusted. If we started to adjust the eligible areas by a block or two, it becomes a slippery slope. So we have very defined eligible areas. And as Joel indicated, you can utilize that map by plugging that your site address into the map to confirm whether or not it is in the approved eligible area. Let's see, what else do we have? There's a question from Keisha Manlove. Do you have to have all 5 properties chosen and under contract?
So this is a good question, Keisha, and there has to be a solid path to site control. We actually, to shed some light on going under contract on properties versus accessing them from a public municipality or something, it is risky to go after properties on the private market. We are not encouraging you all to enter into agreements unless the seller has a clear understanding about the timeline and unique nature of this program. And we really do not want anybody losing any earnest money. That being said, we need the path to site control, and properties being under contract could work. And we need a path to site control.
Thank you, Joel. Next, I guess, comment from Joseph Walls. If there are no guidelines, what stops the major developers from sucking up the funds? Hopefully, by sharing the guidelines around emerging developers, hopefully we responded to that concern. And also, you should know that with our first round, the overwhelming majority of our approved applicants were emerging developers. This round, we are hoping that we have a nice, healthy balance between experienced developers and emerging developers, but hopefully that answers or responds to your concern. Rochelle?
I just want to chime in on that. Joseph, just because someone applies doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be approved. You have to submit a complete application for approval, whether you're applying self-funded or whether you're applying through the loan option route. And also, you're allowed 5 per application. So, you need to have the property. There are rules and there are guidelines, and the guidelines are listed on the website if you haven't had the opportunity to review them. So there are guidelines. You have to meet the requirements. So just because someone submits an application doesn't mean it's going to be approved.
Thank you.
That's the process.
Thank you for that. The next question is from Gwen Motley. What is considered acceptable as a path to site control? I asked this in pursuit of land bank controlled properties and privately owned properties.
Yes, this is an excellent question, Gwen. Thank you so much. Examples of path to site controls could be agreement of sales. It could be an existing application to said organization, which would have to be followed up on by our underwriting and internal lending team. So documentation really goes a long way. And of course, we would have to likely follow up on the status of this documentation.
Thank you, Joel. Next question from Joseph Walls. You will get the prize for most questions this morning. How long does it take to receive the funds for purchase? 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, etc. Also, I filed for the first round, but never heard back in spite of several emails and calls for the status of the funds.
So again, given that this program is unique in nature, the timeline is longer than a traditional lending program. We also have to keep in mind the availability of funds, as this is a revolving loan fund, so funds will be available as projects are completed. That being said, this program can take and potentially will take several months. We're projecting potentially 4 months or so. So it is, again, a longer process, but the unique benefits of this program, we feel and hope, do make it worth the time it may take. And I apologize if you're saying you did not receive contact back. I will look into this and follow up with you, Joseph.
And just to elaborate on the timeline, we do have a workflow process of after we receive your application, there's an initial feasibility review to determine whether or not we can move forward. And if we decide we can move forward, we then engage our third-party service providers to order a plan and cost review and an environmental report. And then we work to create an underwriting credit memo to analyze the feasibility of the overall project and what the risk mitigants are, and take that to our loan committee for review and approval or other outcomes. So within that, for a little over 4-month process, there are steps that we have to take to thoroughly analyze the borrower as well as the project to make sure that it's feasible. There's another question in the chat, but I want to take a pause to see if there's anyone else in the audience who has a question. If you'd like to present the question yourself, feel free to use the raise hand function. Or you can put your question in the chat. Okay. Question again from Joseph Walls. Can the project be in progress when the application is filed? Can I enter into a letter of intent with the seller, file for the funds, and then be reimbursed for any funds expended before the application?
So this is a good question, Joseph. You could technically be reimbursed for funds. However, it could be very risky given that we don't know, the certainty of being approved of a fund. So the answer is yes to your question. However, I would caution you knowing the uncertainty when submitting an application.
Yeah. No, they got a hand in there. I don't see a hand. Can I follow up on that?
Yes,
and
go ahead.
I don't see no hand. I don't know.
Joseph,
Technology.
I'm also happy to do a Zoom with you, Joseph, or email some other time offline if that would be easier to answer some of your specifics.
Yeah, I believe I communicated with you in the last round with the Catalyst Fund. What was the? Oh yeah, okay. The problem is, and that's why I asked you about how long it takes to actually, say you submitted the application, it was approved, and you have funding coming. It would take a long time. Realistically, because I went through this before with another program where there was a property that was available. I could have entered into a contract for it. But when I did, then later on, I tried to enter in, file an application. They said that because the project had already started, that it couldn't be funded as a new project or even a rehab project. It's kind of like,
right.
If you're familiar with the Delaware Historical Society, if you're going to make any repairs and ask for a credit, they have to pre-approve. You can't nail in a nail or paint nothing without their prior approval. So, we don't want to enter in contracts or do anything if we're not going to get the money back.
Right, and thank you so much for bringing that up, Joseph. You're very right, and we would not want to put you at risk in any circumstance. So again, I'm happy to talk about the specific situation you might be looking at later directly.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just try to address that too, just for anyone else on the call who has a question about that, because I know that came up last time. And Rochelle, feel free to chime in too with your thoughts. But if you acquired a property prior to closing, we would be okay with reimbursing closing. But if you started construction, that's where it gets a little murky. So I don't believe we would reimburse you for construction that's in progress. So it would just be the acquisition. And I also wanted to say something else, but it just slipped my mind. Maybe I'll come back.
Was it acquisition costs separately from closing costs, or that's all lumped in one?
I forgot.
Well, think about it. Come back to it. No worries. Thank you. Any other questions from the group?
Can you send out an email with your contact informations on it, or is it in the chat?
We have the Catalyst Fund email address that I will put here in the chat for everybody, and it's shown here earlier in the presentation. So
is it addressed to individuals or just the fund generally?
Just for any like specific questions that we may have, because I know this was more so for getting an application ready. Can we email you guys individually?
Yes, if you email the DE Catalyst Fund at Cinnaire.com, that's the email address, right? So we'll receive that email address and Joel can follow up with you accordingly.
Yep. We will review it.
Can you put that in the chat?
Yes, I just did.
It's in the chat, and you will also receive a copy of the recording and the slides. And so the email address is on the slides multiple times as well.
Yeah. One final question. Do you guys have somebody on staff that can help walk an applicant through the process?
If you email that address, we can provide some technical support on the application. However, we cannot provide technical assistance. However, we can provide support. Any other questions from the group? It's a Monday. Well, I think we may be good, Deanna. Are you seeing anything else on your end?
No, as the helicopter hovers over, no, I just do not see any more questions.
There's a lot of activity going on around your house this morning, Deanna. I guess they knew we were having a workshop. Well, I would like to thank you all very much for taking the time out of your busy lives to be here with us today. For the next steps, I highly recommend you visit our Cinnaire Catalyst Fund landing page, where you will be able to access all program materials and review the content that has been put together on the program. We look forward to hearing from you all and supporting your applications the best that you can. Here are the key contacts for the Catalyst Fund program. And here is that email address that we spoke about, that we put in the chat. We are showing here again. So I hope you all take note of this and feel free to reach out to us. Thank you again, and we hope you all have a great rest of the day. Any last words from Deanna or Wayne or the DSHA team?
No, thank you. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Deanna.
Oh,
Nothing from me. Thank you, everyone.